So we're starting talking about Balah. It says like this: kalim, stam like they are. Kalim that you use right on the fire. To go in shvudim askalos, shvudim spit, and askalos Rashi says is a grill. Rashi uses a French word that means a grill. To them and things that are like that, where you put the food right onto the kli that's on the fire. Tzrichim libun, you have to do libun to that. So this din is really coming from the Gemara. It seems innocent enough that you have to do libun to these kalim, but really there's a shiloh, which is what we're going to talk about, which is like this. The Gemara says. The Gemara asks them a steer between two mishnayos. The Gemara asks a steer between two mishnayos. One mishnah says this that shudin and askalos need to have libun. That's what one mishnah says. In fact, the Gemara that there's another mishnah that says there's a mishnah by Zara. In fact, the Gemara that there's a mishnah in Zvachim, I think it is, that says that those things need only hagol. That's the Gemara's kasha. The Gemara has a whole bunch of possible answers to that question. That's the Gemara's diyun. The Gemara gives a bunch of answers. The answer that we accept in halacha is why one says libun and one says hagol is that the spit that was used for kachim was balei heter. When you cook the kachim in it, you were allowed to eat those kachim. Meaning for a kohen was allowed to eat those kachim. So for him, it was balei heter. Therefore, you don't have to do libun to it. You can kasha by doing hagol. And in Avodah Zarah, we put a tray spit, there it was used for Isser, therefore you have to do libun. Okay, that's what the Gemara says by the Gemara's words, Hetairah Balah, therefore you're allowed to do hagol instead of libun. That's what the Gemara says. So, before we go on, it's just worth knowing the Kashrus says, where did the Gemara come up with this chalav? Shouldn't say that. The Gemara is saying the answer of Steer and Mishnayos. Where did the Mishnayos come up with such a din, that there's a din of Hetairah Balah? We're going to talk about reasons why Hetairah Balah is different, but where did they come up with such an idea? So the Kashrus says, maybe there are others who say it also, that it comes from the Psukim. There's two parashas in the Torah where it talks about Kashering. One is the parasha of Klei Midyan, where they got killed from Goyim, and it says, Kol davar she'yavo be'esh tavir be'esh v'toher. It says that you have the way you kasher something that was used right on the fire is you do libun to it. So it says the din of libun. The other parasha, which is by kachim, kalim that were used for kachim, he says if you look in the parasha, it doesn't say a word about libun. It tells you about hagol, and it tells you to have a klicheres, you should break it. It doesn't say a word about libun. So from there, the Mishnah is being medayik, and the Gemara is explaining that what's the difference between one parsha and the other. Instead of saying that we're going one parsha and the other, we say no. By kachim, you never have to do libun if it was used on the fire, but by Isser you would have to do. Okay, I should be explaining that when you would have the reason why you have to kachim from kachim is because tomorrow it's going to be nicer. Today I'm allowed to eat the carbon. Tomorrow I'm not allowed to eat it. So tomorrow the blios that are in there are nicer. So I'm kashering the kli to get the blios out, so I can use it again for something else. Okay. So the Kashrus learns that it's a deep from the psukim. That's what the Mishnah is talking about. It's deep from the psukim. Okay. And there are others who compare this din of Hetairah Balah to just in concept to the din of not bar not. That there, not bar not by heter there is a kula of not bar not, and by isser there's not. Okay, and that's really a shiloh in Tafshin Beit. What we're saying. That's it. For now, let's say like this. So we're saying over here that the Gemara, there's a machlokes. I'm sorry. The Gemara says that by Hetairah Balah, if you use direct on the fire, you could do hagol instead of libun. The Mishnah Berurah and the Chazon Ish say, and others say it as well, that the Gemara that says you could do hagol means even after it became nicer. You don't have to do to say that you could do hagol on kalim used for kachim. You don't have to do it when it's still heter. You could do it even when it's insert. The Mishnah Berurah says, and the Chazon Ish is even clearer. Okay, so we'll see Svaras in a second. Just for the understanding of that's what he says. Okay, sit down. This now, how it comes to Hilchos Pesach, there's a very quite large and well-known machlokes Shulchan. The Ravid says that the Gemara says if you're balei heter, then you instead of doing libun you could do hagol. So the Ravid says that the reason for that is because when you have a blia into a kli, so we're gonna talk it in the way they talk it, whatever this means. Blia, if you cook something in water, the blia goes into a certain depth into the kli. Okay, it's absorbed a certain amount. The hagol takes that out. If you do it with libun, it's absorbed even deeper into the kli. This is the kind of words that I use. It goes even deeper into the kli. So those deeper blios, you have to do libun to get rid of those deeper blios. So he says, the little bit of blia,
you're burning it out. You're not extracting it. You're burning it out.
Yes, that's correct. You are burning it out. You're right about that. but it's different. I just need to get rid of it in one way or the other.
Right.
So those blios that are in the deeper level, the amount that gets for libun, that deeper amount does not. If the blia was heter, then those little bit of blios don't make a difference. Okay? It doesn't explain exactly why. It says the deeper amount that would go only through libun at that lower level, if it went in as heter, that doesn't cause a problem. It doesn't clearly explain what the issue is. But he does say it only depends on how it went in. If it went in as heter, if I remember he says it, that if the blios that went in as heter, they went in mutter, and I shouldn't say, I don't remember how he says. But he's clear that it just depends on what it is when it went in, and he says therefore, if you would have, not only would it be by kachim, but he has other cases. If you have meat, or kosher meat, or kosher milk, or chametz, then it would be considered heter. Today I cooked chametz in a pan. I made toast in my toaster. The blia went in right on the fire, but the blia that went in was heter. I'm allowed to use chametz now, just like I'm allowed to use kachim on the day that you shop through the carpet. So it went in as heter, and therefore you could get it out with hagal. That's what the Rambam holds. The Ramban and many other Rishonim made a lot of kashrus on him, and some from various scholars, even all kinds of kashrus on him, and they learn like this. It doesn't depend if it went in as heter. It's that once the blios that are deep in can't change their status. They're too small. It's like a pachas mikashir. It's too small to change statuses. So if it went in as kachim, it can't turn into nicer when it's in there. It went in as basar, it can't turn into basar b'cholah. That little bit that's in the deeper level, that only goes in from libun, that goes in through direct fire, that part that goes deeper in can't change status. So it can't become from kachim into nicer. It can't go from basar into basar b'cholah. But if it goes in and doesn't have to change status, then it becomes also without changing status, then it can answer. Meaning, if you have chametz, if I made toast in my toaster today, the chametz that's in there is chametz already today. Just today I happen to be allowed to eat chametz. When it comes Pesach time, I'm not allowed to eat it. So nothing had to change in the status of the blia that's in there. So since nothing had to change in the status, it went in as chametz and it didn't have to change. It stayed chametz. Then that kli would need libun because I have to get those blios out because there's chametz in there. If I put kachim into this, I put kachim in, I'm allowed to eat kachim. I'm just not allowed to eat nicer. It never changes into nicer. It doesn't change. The things that are deep in don't change in. The things that are not so deep in, the things that go into our goals do change. But the little bit that gets on the bottom, that doesn't change. So he holds that, according to the Ravid, the din of Hetairah Balah means that for chametz also, if you use them directly on the fire, you don't have to do libun. Okay, so you can kasher your toaster with hagal. According to the Ravid. So the Mechaber, who's saying this din here in Hilchos Pesach, who's saying that you have to, if you use a shvut, use a spit for right on the fire, you have to do libun, it's because he's passing on to Ramban. Like most Rishonim passing on to Ramban, that even for chametz is not considered Hetairah, chametz is considered Isser, because when in it was already chametz, and therefore, if you use a kli for directly on the fire, for chametz you have to do libun to it. Okay, that's what is going on here in this din, which seems at first glance, we say, of course you have to do libun. Really, he's passing like the Ramban, and those Rishonim that there's that chametz is not considered Hetairah. Okay, now it's worth noting. We'll see in a different week. The Ramah is mitzdaref the Ravid in certain cases, and the Mishnah, in certain cases we will be samach on the Ravid that chametz is Hetairah, and the Mishnah says if a person by mistake used a kli, they had done hagal instead of libun, and then they used it on Pesach. The makom has the maruba and the makom that is ben yomer, which is usual anyhow, and a whole bunch of things that you could also be making on the samach on the Ravid. The Ravid that we're saying would not pass on the Ravid. In certain cases, we'll see the Ramah and the Mishnah himself is mitzaref to other things. Okay, so it's worth knowing what it's negated to is that if the kli was used directly on the fire, that you really have to do libun to kasher. If you just did hagolah, you can get away with less, and you don't have to do the Rav would hold you did enough to kasher. We have real from the Ramah. We'll have real nafkaminas to the sheet of the Rav. Okay, we're not going to get to that. It's worth noting, but there's another type of kli that needs libun. We said the kind of kli that needs libun is a kli that you use directly on the fire. Right? This is what we're talking about. You use a shvut. You put the toast or the steak right onto the fire, right onto the kli. That's right over the fire. That's over the fire. But there's another kind of kli that needs libun, and that is there's another kli which is a klicheres. There, if you use a klicheres, you need libun not because you use directly on the fire. Even if I put hot product into a klicheres, I need to make libun also. That there is no kula for Hetairah Balah from cheres. Okay, the kula of Hetairah Balah only means that if you did directly on the fire, you don't have to do libun, you could do hagala. But if you did Hetairah on a Kashrus, everyone agrees that you have to do libun, and not only does everybody say that, but of course the Chavasas. What?
Never else like this last period.
Well, so the question is, should you say, well, just like hagala takes it, we say that the blia that hagala takes out from something used directly on the fire takes out so much of the blia that what's left is not a problem. Yeah. So we say for Kashrus also, hagala should take out so much that what would be left would be mutter also if it was Hetairah Balah.
No, we haven't idea how much it is. So that's all you have to say.
Okay, so rather than argue on the but some blios come out. So should we maybe say the same thing? So you could think that just like by libun, if you use directly on the fire, you have to libun to get it all out, and hagala doesn't work. But Hetairah hagala does work. So maybe here also hagala should work. So it does.
What's the chalav sham Ramban? He's saying it doesn't change status.
Yeah. Okay.
So then, why does it do hagala at all?
Because it's only the deep parts that don't change status. I mean, the little bit that's so deep in that only can come out with libun, that little bit doesn't change status. But the main blia, the blia that's more in the bulk of the blia, which is the blia that comes out with hagala, that can change status.
Interesting.
Yes, yeah, I can't tell you what that means. I mean, we're using the words that they use to talk about deeper in and less deeper. I don't know what that means.
So maybe what cliche is there? Hagala doesn't get out enough at all.
Right? No. I'm saying so. You might think it, but the thing is that it's not true. And if you think about it for a second, the Chavasas is obvious. The Chavasas says this whole din of Hetairah Balah came from the psukim, that the psukim by Kashering don't say anything about libun. Well, the psukim by Kashering say, what does it say? It says the im b'klicheres bushala umorak b'shuta f'mayim. It says if you use a klicheres, no, I'm sorry, that's for a different class. I'm sorry, but it says maybe it doesn't say. Okay, anyhow, I take it back what I'm saying. Okay, anyhow, so that's accepted that it does. This thing doesn't work for hagala. It doesn't work for klicheres. Now back to something that we talked about last week. This is related to this and like this. Well, Vosner says like this. He brings from some Rishonim that the amount of blia, this thing that we're talking about, that is the hagala amount of blia, and then on the bottom there's like a deeper amount that only has to come out through libun. He says he brings some of Ritva that blia is so minuscule that it's not enough to even be noising tam into the food. Okay, that blia, the main blia is a nice sizable blia that would be noising tam. That little blia is such a minuscule blia, it's not going to be noising tam. So, the obvious question, he says, well, wait a second. And Rav Osler elaborates on this, and he brings it sort of from a prima level. He says, wait a second. If the blia is so little, why are you taking it out for altogether? Who cares? Let's leave the blia in there. Why do you have to get blias out altogether? If the little bit that only comes out through libun is such a little bit that it can't be noticed down, who cares? Who needs this blia out? Who has to get the blia out altogether? To which he says, surprise, surprise, he says, the Ritva says, the Ritva says, he says, when the Torah says that you have to do libun, it's teaching us something like this. It's saying, if the blia that went in originally was enough to be noticed down, then you must remove every speck of that blia.
Wait, no.
I'm getting that. You have to remove every drop of the blia. You can't just remove enough to not be nursing time. Once there was enough, once there was enough to be nursing time originally, you have to remove all of it, even the amounts that would not be nursing time. So that's it. How about if it's Eina Ben Yirmiyah?
No, what had to Eina Ben Yirmiyah? It's also being Hashem.
Okay, good question. I'm not sure. Okay, it's a fair question.
What do you mean? It says Talmud.
No.
So he said, so if we have it in...
It's a lot of blia, but it's like Talmud. So...
It's only important because...
No. But if it's Xeris that once the blia goes in, you must remove it out. And aside from the rules of Tam Ki'ikr, aside from the fact that the Tam will make your food trade, you have to have a separate reason you have to get it out. So why don't I have to get it in?
Believe that every place has a Talmud Shmach. You have to believe that Talmud Shmach.
Okay, maybe. Okay.
But why would it have to kill you? Why would it have to do that?
So wait, I'm getting that. So this is what the Ritva says. It's Xeris HaKosov. The din of Levi is Xeris HaKosov. That even if you have a blia, that even if you had a blia that was originally enough to be noticed in time, then you have to get at the whole blia, even the part that was not. That's not going to be noticed in time. Okay. Now, this would answer his question, which was, we asked last week, we talked about it, how could it be a din that if there's rust on a kli, you have to take the rust off and take it out? How much blia could there be under the rust? A little bit of blia. Why don't we say that, like Rabbi Shefta said, why don't we say that it's asur l'shtamish b'shefa? That little bit of blia that's under there will be asur l'shtamish b'shefa. Okay, well, according to the Ritva, we have an answer, because there's a difference. Also, the shtamish b'shefa means that the original blia that went in was not enough to ask for the food. The whole blia in this whole kli is not enough that could ever ask for the food. So if the blia that went in there originally is not enough to ask for the food, then you don't have to take it out. The Ritva says it's clear. When the blia that went in originally was enough to ask for the food, then you have a chiyuv to get out every last little bit. But if the blia that went in originally was not enough to ask for the food, it was such a small blia, so then that's the rule of Vasu Shtamish b'shefa.
Okay, the blia but Kashrus b'shefa also is enough to ask for the food. Then to put so much in.
But in this pot, there isn't a way that this could ever answer. So I never got started into the parish of Hagol Kalim, so I don't have to do anything. But once I get started, the rules are now you would think you only have to get a certain amount of blia. So the third time you have to get out the whole blia. Okay, so this is what he says, and that would answer. The only problem with it is, it would answer the stira between the din of also the Shtamish b'shefa and the din of Rus. It would answer the stira. There's only one problem. It would put Rabbi Belsky on the wrong side of the din, because Rabbi Belsky was saying it even in the case where there was a full blia, you really did have the kasha. There was just one spot that you didn't have the kasha. Okay, but it's worse than that. Okay, which this
Belsky's last week's.
This was last week, yeah. So this would put Rabbi Belsky. It would answer the stira, putting Rabbi Belsky on the wrong side of the answer. The only thing is, I have to just tell you is that Rav Vosner says, even though he says this from the Ritva, the Prima Godim, he brings that the Prima Godim says beferish that this is not true. He says, I forgot the words, I think it says Zed Shibush or something like that. He doesn't mean the Ritva. He says, but it's not true. The Ritva is assuming that the amount of blia that's left on the bottom, the part that only Libam can get out, is so little that it won't be nice and top. The Prima Godim says, that's not true. No, the amount of blia that's in it would make the food trace. Haraya. What's the din if you did only hagol to a kli that needs libun? What's the din? You had a kli that needs libun, you did only hagol, and then you used the kli. What's the din?
So b'diavad was good.
B'diavad the food is trace. The din is, many say, according to the brother, the din should be is that the food should be kosher. B'diavad the food should be kosher. He said, it's not true. The din is that it's trace. So he says, so it's not true. And guess what? Not only does the Supreme Court say it, not only does the Rav Vosner bring the Supreme Court says it, Rav Vosner says there's loads of Rishonim who say that also. Okay, so Rav Vosner is trying to say you could maybe be samich on that, maybe to be samich on the Ritva, the Makov Hesed and things like that. He's bringing it to say there is such a sheet as Rishonim. He wants to say that it's not absurdity. Okay, but to say that so again, we're coming back to the same thing, which is this idea that there may be a chiyuv to kasher a kli beyond the dinim of tam kicker. I mean, even if the tam that's in there can't trafe up your food, you have stam, you have a din, you have to kasher the kli anyhow. Or you might be mechuyev to continue the kashering until you get it all out. And we're seeing again, there is such an idea, but it seems to be coming out on the wrong side. It's coming out as the rishonim that are not accepted halacha, rather than the main shitas that we would accept. Okay, one more thing, which is like this. The Magen Avraham says over here, and it's really almost a beferish in Shulchan Aruch later. You remember we spoke about that the case whether you let a kasha from milchuks to fleshings, whether you let a kasha back and forth from milchuks to fleshings. Well, that din in the Mechaber is talking about that you're doing libun kal to the kalim to go from milchuks to fleshings. That was the question revolved around the Mechaber who's talking about libun kal. And the Magen Avraham says here, based on that din, and based on what we're saying, that if a kli is milchuks and you want to make it fleshings, so the blia into the kli was Hetairah, right? You only absorb milk or only absorb meat into the kli. So if you have a kli that absorbed meat right on the fire, you have a fleshiga broiling pan. Okay? You used it for meat, kosher meat used on it. So the blia was Hetairah. You want to kasher this kli, you don't need to do libun. It's really Gemara. The Gemara says by Hetairah Balah, if it was cooked in a kli right on the fire, you don't have to do libun, you can do hagol. So the Magen Avraham says it over here, Rabbi Kvega says it over there, and it's very interesting. Really, it doesn't say the word straight out, but it's just basically in there because the Gemara says that kachim is Hetairah. We have a machlokes whether chametz is Hetairah, and we pass the chametz is not Hetairah. Okay, but milk and meat, kosher milk and kosher meat are Hetairah. So this is a very common question, which is a person took their frying pan, their fleshing frying pan, by mistake they made cheese in it. Or the other, they took a milk frying pan and they made meat into it. Okay, so the people look at it. The first assumption is you look and you say, wait a second, it's a frying pan. Frying pan used right over the fire. You have to leave them. You can't leave them. It's not practical. So you have to throw it out, which is what you would say for Pesach. You have a frying pan. You can't kasher it, so you can't use it for Pesach. But the truth is that it's not like that. If you have a fleshing frying pan and it was used when it was Einah ben Yomer from the hooks, so it's not basar b'chalav. There's no blios of basar b'chalav in this pan. The pan is fleishigs, and the pan is milchigs. It was used on Sunday for meat. You make
blios of basar
bread. Yeah, so you made a breaded schnitzel on Sunday. So now the pan has blios of meat in it. Then on Wednesday, you went ahead and you made something with cheese in it. Okay, you made an egg with cheese in it in the same frying pan. So now this pan is not basar b'chalav because it was the meat was ein ben yomim by the time the blios of meat were ein ben yomim by the time you did the milk. So it has blios of basar, it has blios of chalav, and they were in ways that are right on the fire, but it doesn't need libun. It needs hagolah. Because both of those things are heter. You can't use it for either. You can't use it for milchigs because it has fleishig blios. You can't use it for you can't use it the other way either. It has both blios in it. But if you want to do hagolah to it, that's fine. You can kasher it by doing hagolah because the blios went in as heter. So blios of heter that are directly on the fire can be taken out with hagolah. Mm-hmm. So a frying pan like that can be kashered with hagolah. Okay. So if people have called like that when they you have to just remind them, even though you could do hagolah today, you can't do this if it becomes certain kinds of treif or for Pesach. People just say, I was told I could kasher like this. Okay. But so that's in a home where the milk and the meat are kosher, okay. But when you move to a factory, the kind of case is like a belt or a baking tin that you put the food right onto it. Usually we're kashing not because it's kosher, we're kashing because it was treif. Okay, so if it was treif, you need to have libun. I mean, usually you can't kasher. But there's a very specific child, which you're probably familiar with. I'll talk it out to explain one part of it, which is like this. Lots of the things that we kasher from are from milchigs to parv. In companies from milchigs to parv. So the company, we certify both the milchigs and the parv, but today they're making muffins that are dairy, and tomorrow they want to make muffins that are parv. So the question is, the milk that's in there is not just milchigs. It's not just a question of it being milchigs and fleishigs, that milk is heter. There's another question, which is that the milk is stam. And there are people who are going to eat our parva product, people who will buy the parva product who don't eat stam. For the people who eat stam, so there's no issue of chol vacuum, they eat it. They hold it mutter. As far as the milchigs of it, milchigs is heter. You can kasher with hagolah, with libun kal. You don't need to do libun to it. You can kasher like that, because as far as they're concerned, there's nothing wrong with the things. But what about the other person who doesn't eat stam? So for him, how should we judge this pan that has to be kasher now?
We don't care.
What do you say?
We don't care.
You don't care what?
We don't care about that person.
You don't care about that person.
That's the way it is in all organizations. Okay. Why are you only asking about this? Then you could ask about 212 also.
That what?
But people are makbid on 212, and they get an item that says on it parv. How do they know that it was maybe it was kasher?
Okay, good. Okay, good. So
the organizations don't care across the board.
Can I say a little softer than we don't care? Not that we don't care. It's that I'm going to say a little softer. This is one position, which is a hashgacha has to paskin lots of shilos. They have to make decisions about how to do things. They can't possibly, it would be ridiculous to say we should be machmir about everything, or put a long settle on the side of the candy bar of all the shilos that went into it. So we have to paskin certain shilos. So the hashgacha paskins a shilo, and you have to take it. You have to accept it as if you're eating our hashgachas because you're willing to accept that we paskin the shilos the way that is good for you. So just like we paskin the chol stam heter, and we therefore will paskin that in Kashering, we can kasher on that level also, as if the chol stam was heter, we can kasher on that. That's one attitude. Okay, I think it's a little soft to think we don't care about them. It's that we had to make a decision, and the decision was this way. It's not even, this one is not even a secret. You know, we certify lots of chol stam, so we make that decision. That's what we do. That's one thing. Ravidovsky has a very different position. He says no, hashgachas don't take a position on where the chol stam is mutter. We're not taking a position. We service the whole community. We service some people who want chol stam by giving them chol stam. We service some people who want not chol stam by giving them chol yisrael or by giving them parah foods. We service lots of different groups of people. So when we service the people with chol stam, we give them to their standard. When we service the people who want, chol yisrael, or they want parah that's not chol stam at all, we have to use a different standard. So those people, when we service them, the hashgacha hasn't taken a position. Hashgacha is neutral about the question of chol stam. They let everybody know that when we write OUD, it's like writing, CRCD, we're writing OUD chol stam. And everybody knows that it's like an open secret that that's what it is, and therefore we're just helping those people. We haven't taken a position on that job. Okay, that's what he said.
But that's not the question. The question is when it says CRC or OU.
Right, so he's saying you're saying is...
Then we don't know what's going on behind it.
Right, so one way of looking at it was that the CRC took a position that chalav stam is mutter, and then we can use that position even when we deal with the power product. And he says, no, we never took a position on that issue. We didn't take any position. We just we helped some people by providing them with chalav stam without officially making a decision that chalav stam is mutter. Okay, now,
going back to the belts, so you say that the belts, in the case of Libun, you can't do it, so what do you do in the company?
So, as a rule, the belt that goes through the fire, through the oven, and it has direct contact with the food, has to be replaced.
Has to be replaced.
Yeah, there is such a thing as Kashrus, doing Libun. It's not realistic. Maybe we'll talk about that a different time. There is a way to possibly do it, but basically it's not possible. So it's only for the belt that goes through the fire.
And then if there's Hetairah, then you could do Hagala.
Or Libun Kal.
Could you do Hagala to belt?
Yeah, sure you can. It's easier to Hagala to a belt. And Libun Kal is even easier. Running through the oven, if you do it right, if you do it right, just running the belt through the oven might do Libun Kal. So if we say your way, which is we decided that chalav stam is heter, right? So then we have it easy. It'll be easy to Kashrus. Rabbi says we didn't make that decision. Now, to which Rabbi Sheffer says, what are you talking about? You didn't make a decision that chalav stam is heter. He says, we certify tens of thousands of products that are chalav stam. We didn't take a position. He says, we take positions on 100 other things. Right? Like you said, we've passed 1,000 other shilas. So you think that we didn't, by passing 1,000 other shilas, why is this shilah different than any other? Just because this one is public. So people happen to know about this, and there's a way to know whether I'm getting the shilah or not. I can know if it says D or if it doesn't say whether I'm getting the
I think Rebelsi means that, and this I think is the main issue, and that most people will not be aware. If somebody's not going to eat chalav yisrael, look at things and say, hey, it's part, it's good for me. It's not the foursome that you might have become a part if you only chalav yisrael. Totally not percent if you want to be a part of it and change it, but fine. But right now, everybody's deciding that it's okay. So you can't
the acid is that the chalav stam yenu, and that's all the passing is stam yenu, and you just have not to know this other one. But if you know, you know.
What he's saying is here. This is something that I do know that I don't want to eat those foods that have the D on it because I know I don't want to eat that food. So Yossi is
I'm thinking now on a popular shilah and say, too bad. You have to be done with some extent on the hechsher. But if these people don't want to be done, they say, I want to be makbid on chalav. With all the whole chalav, so you can't. People don't know.
So Yossi is mechaber.
But I think 212, the minute people understand now, it doesn't say 212.
It is not.
It's okay. But this is sit there right on the kosher to 212.
So Yossi is mechaber.
People eat 212. No, they can't assume that it's anything is.
So Yossi is mechaber. Yossi is mechaber. Rabbi Sheffer says, even though he holds that the OU did paskin, and they really hold that chalav stam is heter, he's like what kind of a joke to say that we don't hold the chalav stam is mutter? He says it's like a joke, but he says, but we're misleading the public. The public who buys powerful products thinks that they're getting not the OU chalav stam stuff, they're getting the OU things that are not saimach on the kul of chalav stam. They're bedafka buying it. So not off the din of the hagal's kelim of it, but because we're misleading the person by giving him food that he doesn't expect to eat. But he doesn't know your thing. He doesn't know about tartaric acid. We didn't mislead anybody. He is uninformed. He asks us for food. We give him food. What we think is mutter. We don't have to explain to him everything because he can know. But here he knows that he doesn't want the food, so we're misleading him by giving him something that's made the wrong standard. Now,
this is Rabbi
Sheffer. But Rabbi Sheffer says like this. You're going to laugh when I explain to you what's going on here. Moshe says like this. If a kli is ein ben yomi, and you cook food in the kli that's ein ben yomi that was never kasher, Moshe says that food is mutter l'chatchila. It's not mutter b'diavad. If you put a drop of isser into food, it's mutter b'diavad because the isser is bottled. If I use a kli that's ein ben yomi, the food is mutter l'chatchila. Just that you have an isser on you, you're not allowed to use a kli that's ein ben yomi. It's the gzeir, the Chazal said, don't use kelim that are ein ben yomi because you might by mistake use them when they're ben yomi. So you have an issue to not use the kli, but the food has nothing to do with the food. The food is kosher l'chatchila to eat that food. So the store owner or the hashgacha has a responsibility to kasher the kli. We're the ones who he has to do it, and we are the surrogates that take the responsibility to make sure that it's done. So we have a responsibility to kasher the kli, but the food, if it's ein ben yomi, is kosher. So Rabbi Sheffer says, if we have a kli that was used for made milchugah cookies on it, an oven belt that uses milchugah cookies, and we wait for that belt to be ein ben yomi, If we make parable cookies on that belt now, the cookies are kosher l'chatchila. The people who eat not chol stam, they can eat it l'chatchila. We're giving them food that's kosher l'chatchila. We're doing our responsibility to them to give them food that's kosher l'chatchila. Now, we have to answer for ourselves. Hey, you can't use that belt without kashering it. We can't let the owner use that belt without kashering it. This is now a personal responsibility. The owner and we as his overseers have to have responsibility to make sure that he kashers his belt. You're not going to use belt without kashering. Okay, we personally, we collectively, as the hashkafa say, we hold that chol stam is heter. It's just milchus. There's no isser involved in this thing. We, to satisfy our responsibility to kasher, we will kasher with as Hetairah Balah. So if the kli is ein ben yomim, then to the consumer, we're not misleading anybody. We're giving them food that's kosher l'chatchila. And as far as our responsibility, we've done our responsibility by doing a hagala or a leaving cup.
So that was the only dog? So by a belt, you're just wasting stuff in your
By a belt that's from milk, not a belt that's safe. A belt that was milked, well, Rabbi Shefter will tell you that as Rabbi
And
Shefter.
would also with trace then.
No, because if it's ain't ben yomi from trace, then the food is kosher l'chatchila, but we haven't done our responsibility to kasher the belt. We have to kasher. You can't kasher a belt with hagala. It's Hetairah Balah. But if the belt was belay, what we consider to be heter, because it's called stam, we consider it to be heter. So our responsibility is to kasher. That's heter can be kasher with hagala or with leaving cow. But if it was belay,
For the consumer, it's okay.
it's kosher l'chatchila. So we wait for the belt to be.
Even with the surah, for the consumer.
It would be kosher l'chatchila. Yes, the food would be. Yes, the food would be kosher l'chatchila.
This is right.
Yes.
That answers the 212 issue also. If it was just kasher one night, as long as we were making sure it's ain't ben yomim.
If
It's okay.
If it's ain't ben yomim. If it's ain't ben yomim. No, see, because there are people who will do 190 to do a pekima also. First, they'll use it. There'll be 2 hours to get the shave from the kosher.
Kima doesn't work.
Right. So that's that's not as clear cut. Now I have to just say, so Rabbi Shefter is quoted as saying that since we hold chol stam is heter, therefore you can kasher with libun kal or hagala or such a belt. That's not really what he said. He doesn't say that you can kasher it. He says you have to wait for it to be ein ben yomim and then you can kasher it, because he's not ignoring the people who want the chol stam. He's not saying we don't care about you, right? He's not saying that. He says we want to make sure we don't want to mislead you. So he actually says either has to be ein ben yomim and then have libun kal, or for his purposes he says you can do libun kal and then be ein ben yomim. Now, for example, the company works 5 days a week. On Friday, when they finish production, they could do libun kal, and then not produce until Monday. Because what he needs is it has to be ein ben yomim, that the guy who's eating the power products who wants not chol stam can eat that food. That's what he wants. Okay, so now I'm sorry if I'm missing.
What does it do? In fact, do?
As a rule, they follow Rabbi Shefter on this. But there are people who have asked the question or rebelled who therefore will not do that. Okay, but as a rule, they do follow Rabbi Shefter for that.
So if the RC keeps holding the throw,
yes.
Is he?
No.
Is he allowed to do it?
Yes, because the RCs, for better or for worse, see themselves as representatives of the organization. They do what the organization wants. I have to tell you something.
No, they're doing actually. The organization doing it.
That's correct. Sean's name is on the paper, not mine. Okay, so now.
He keeps holding the throw. I don't know if he can do it.
Okay, now I have to tell you something. I forgot to mention that within this is just a sorry point, and then I have one last thing to say is that within the people who don't eat chol stam, okay, there's 2 different groups of people. Okay, many of the people who don't eat chol stam say the din is that this food is kosher. That's the din. But it's a milah to not eat chol stam. Moshe says himself, "Bal nefesh yachmer and not eat this food." They personally see that as heter.
Shiloh might be awesome.
What? Yes, and therefore bal nefesh not eat it. For example, Rav Henkin says that a person who doesn't eat chol stam can eat from the kelim of somebody who doesn't eat chol stam. Okay, so that's how some people's attitude is, that I don't eat it, but I don't think that it's straight. I don't as a paskin as straight. But that's because these people wouldn't even have the shiloh altogether. They really hold, so to speak, in din that it's mutter. And then there's a different group of people who hold that no, it's a mistake to think that it's mutter, and it's really usher, completely usher. Okay, they're the people who we're talking about. Those group of people is what we're talking about.
I mean, I did call Akim after the case. If it's also the kelim also for sure.
So that's what making it think that it's really minadin, it's mutter, and it's a hakpada, you don't have to take it to that extent to even ask the kelim. That's what he's saying.
I don't know if I think
a Deutsche company, right? The Mega do not to cash altogether, like the Moshe said.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Why? Because stam killing in the binyan.
No, if it's any binyan.
Because he doesn't have the zeal of chazal of any binyan to binyan. That's what Moshe said, right?
That's this tshuva. This tshuva that says that. That's the tshuva where he says any binyan is kashrus l'chatchila, and therefore it's just on the corner.
That's considered by Yisrael, he said.
Yes.
But therefore, binyan doesn't have to kashrus. That's the mechur adon, right? And now you have the shayla with the dichlan thing is also. Okay.
I agree.
So it makes me have to kasher also.
One last thing I have to say. It's just. This is not a question. It's just interesting to know, which is, I just told you that Rabbi Shechta says since when it's Ein Binyamin, the food is kasher l'chatchila. Therefore, if it's Ein Binyamin, you can do this whole chesed, you can do kasher as Hetairah. Okay. Well, that itself is not something that everybody would agree to. The Hashkoch is taking a position on that. They're taking a position to accept what Moshe said, that it's clear that the food is kosher l'chatchila, not that it's kosher b'di'evet. Because the food is kosher l'chatchila, that's not a obvious thing. Not everybody agrees to that. So, not there's something wrong with that. I'm just saying, it's just funny. Here we're saying we're trying to satisfy everybody's purposes, and here's an example right here in the middle of the story that by no means are we going to satisfy everybody. There are people who will not be satisfied.
We all get satisfied.
Right? No, I don't have a name. And I'm not saying this as a kasha because it's of course that the hashkachos have to take positions on things. It's just interesting to note that right here in the middle of our saying we don't want to too much push a position on people and they should get what they get. But really, Rabbi Shechta is not looking at it like that. He's looking at us. The people believe, like you said, they look at it and say, I don't want chalav stam. I want to buy the stuff that's not chalav stam. They think that they're getting not chalav stam. So for that, we have to address what they think they get. Okay.